we're going to do here a little bit of an experiment, which is, I think, very appropriate for the format of talking about creative bureaucracy. And we're going to have 4 instigator storytellers, one for each quadrant. They're implanted there to start conversations. We had a bit of a sharing yesterday evening, and they've thought of examples of how this concept relates to their life and their work. So, without further ado, I'll start introducing them. I'll speak out their name, and you can briefly say, lift up your hand, maybe say one thing about yourselves, and then I'll go into a proper introduction of what all of this is about. Okay, Philip Holiday.
You can say something about the home.
Do you want to say something about yourself?
I've done a lot of different things.
Give us 2 examples, Philip.
2 examples?
Yeah, 2 examples, yes.
2 examples of what?
Of things that you think are memorable.
Okay, I brought ACDC to Hobart.
Wow!
That was me. Angus?
It's going to be hard to do.
And I organised the Walk of Reconciliation over the Tasman Creek in 2020. Beautiful.
Okay, next, Neil Noy.
Thank you. Hobart City Council. Been there for too long.
Longer than me.
Yeah, so 2 things. Got to speak at a public meeting this week relating to my other area of note was being able to work with young girls on the city a decade and a half ago, which is what I want to talk about. Not as interesting as
Yes. Yeah. Okay, and Edward.
Okay, I work for Hit Engineering, which is an engineering consulting firm. I am an engineer, process engineer. I don't design or do any engineering anymore, but I manage our designers' facilitation of safe design. And my recent claim to fame is I'm the head of the CRC first Tasmanian hydrogen facility, which is hydrogen. I was involved in that, so I got the safety case approved for the startup of that. So that's 100% renewable green energy to produce hydrogen.
Wow. Okay, and over the final quadrant, Dave Caldor.
Nice to see everybody. I'm Dave Caldor. 2 things I'll just quickly say. I was very closely involved in Hobart's climate assembly, which was, I guess we could say, one of the first citizens' assembly that we've run locally as a way of, I guess, building new democratic processes in decision making and building more civic participation locally, which I can talk a little bit more about, and we think on the whole was a great success. And I've just emerged from having my second child born about 6 weeks ago, so it's cool to be out and about. 12 weeks ago. So nice to meet you.
Okay, and we have Samara, who actually made all of this happen. Surprise, surprise. And incredible co-facilitator, Rachel Edwards.
Hello, I don't really know what to say because my life has just changed on a dime. I've been working as an ABC producer for the last 7 years, and I'm now starting to run events for libraries in Tasmania, and it's exhilarating, and I can be illuminated.
Yes.
Excellent. Also, excuse me, creative bureaucracy. What a paradox. Also,
And very briefly, my name, for those that don't know me, is Heine Parsons. Also work at City Hobart, but my true thing is I'm in awe of how human beings have been able to come together and create cities and towns, and how we make this a possibility, sort of generate the energy and the creativity that makes society and culture possible. So that's my little obsession. So I'm going to give a brief recap and understanding of what all of this is about and why maybe it matters to you. So first of all, just giving you a background that a number of volunteers from across Australia came together.
And New Zealand.
Sorry? And New Zealand, sorry, and New Zealand came together and put together a platform to create a festival hub. This platform is a website and also a booking central location, and it was really about getting volunteers to put up their hand and host events in their city. We're the first one ever done in Hobart, and the idea is that hopefully this can grow over time, and this may end up becoming like the very famous festival in Berlin that happens every year, the Creative Bureaucracy Festival in Berlin, which apparently is amazing and full of raw energy and sharing of all manner of things. So, why does this concept matter at all? Because the greatest things live in apparent contradictions. The greatest capacity is when you have two things that seem to be diametrically opposed. You know, the stolidness of bureaucracy with the idea of creativity, and you bring them together, and that's where you get true change happen. Charles Landry, who is together with Margie Post, the originators of this idea, were tapping into the work that Charles Landry had been doing since the 80s about creative cities, and taking it from the sort of secluded idea of the creative sector being just about the knowledge economy, the private sector entrepreneurialism, and bringing into the public sector as being an enabler of this. Without great public sector, without great complex organizations that sometimes need to balance rules and regulations, all of this can't happen. So they undertook in 2017, principally when Charles Landry was the thinker in residence in Adelaide, a number of interviews all across the public sector and some large private organizations. Also looked at the literature review and found that there's a number of key things that are associated with successful cities and successful economies and vibrant places. Well, some of these are the willingness and an openness to say yes, if instead of automatically shutting down ideas, being willing to consider them and reframing them and saying, look, that can happen. We just need to make sure that it's safe, it meets certain minimums of regulations, but the intent and spirit of it can carry through. That was one of the very important learnings. Another very important learning is that a lot of the times you need the rules and regulations and you need the transparency, but you also need to understand what is the principle, what's the intent of those. And so the most successful organizations have found an ability and a capacity to be flexible around this principle. For example, Calgary, the manager there of local laws, they had over 1,400 local laws, and they found it was actually quite stifling. And so, what ended up happening is he convened a round table of everyone, of all the stakeholders, he abstracted all these key principles and key considerations that need to be taken on board. And since then, it's enabled a lot more things to happen in Calgary with something that seems so boring as reinventing the local laws. Another very important aspect of all of this, even if you don't care at all about the touchy-feely aspect, is making the most of your taxpayer, ratepayer money. more you have engaged, happy and passionate professionals in organisations of any sort, the more they do, more work for the same money. And this discretionary effort, as it's called, is very important. Studies by the likes of Gallup, IBM, Adobe have found that in general this discretionary effort is about 35% of all productivity. When we're having conversations around Australia of how poor our productivity growth has been in the last sort of 20, the last sort of 5-7 years, it's very important that we tap into everything, every reservoir we have, to be able to continue to be the lucky country. And then I think finally, all of this is ultimately about that perennial question of breaking down silos, because we have harder and harder challenges which you've already sort of touched upon and you're going to have the conversations about right now. Things like how do we honestly understand our relationship with First Nations that were here before us, and what does that mean, and what does it mean for us that came afterwards. Also, how do we tackle the growing inequality, and some of it's manifested in affordability crisis in housing. And again, this is not a single silver bullet solution, but there definitely is the need to create and innovate around these things. And obviously climate change is an enormous one, and we've got to do a lot more of being able to look at things different and be able to reinvent things. So that's why we're here tonight, and I desire from the bottom of my heart that we have great productive conversations, and that this is the start of one of the great movements that I personally feel very identified with. So thank you very much for coming.
We know we live it, and there's power in reality. Some of the things you guys have said. Okay. I'm just going to chuck these words out there. There's going to be more of these events. So these are things to start cogitating on, and then we can take it further and take it a bit further back and see if I can project even more. And even though I work in the library, yes, I have spent my entire life getting into trouble for talking everything in the library. All right. We have systemic thinking. We are working with systems that are established. So we are coming into these systems with pre-assumed assumptions about how they work, and we are rolling with it. And when I say we, I'm speaking a massive collective we, because I think most of you are here because you are ready, or you're in these spaces, ready not to roll with that systemic thinking, which the assumption is that you walk straight into. Can I read my writing? Yes. Now, but we use the tools of this systemic thinking, and we can use these tools of systemic thinking, and we can use them differently.
And effectively.
Yeah. The scale of change as well. Like, do you want to come in and make that change in a few days? Now, I've come from a media organisation into a state government organisation where I'm now having to work with media on the other side, and I'm keeping my powder dry on the changes that I really feel need to be made here, because they exist for a reason, but it's not my job 8 days in to come in and try and put the or make those changes. So the scale of change, the rate of change, and then how and when you make those decisions. What else have we got? How good is it to be in bureaucracy? This was a question that was asked. They exist for a reason. They have been created for a reason. They've fallen out of system. So positing that question, how good is it to exist in a bureaucracy? How much do you want to work the system? How much do you want to play inside it? Like there are people I am closely related to who have always said you've got to get into it if you want to make the changes. May or may not agree with that one. How not to be broken by a bureaucracy. Some of the answers to that included dogs, have dogs. How do you reconcile dissonance as well when you're working in a system and you don't necessarily like the way it rolls, but how do you work with that dissonance every day? Like how do you manage that? How do you look after self-care, for want of a better expression? Mel Robbins, but anyway, Mel Robbins is quite good. Communication and common ground. We are people, we've got hearts, like, you know, some people are very dry and very short on emails, and some people are way too abusive. Every single person here, we would connect with in some way if we were going to have those conversations with. So communication came through in this. Taking people on your own journey also came up in part of this conversation. Culture wars, just chucking that out there. Like we are coming into a federal election. There's, you know, there are a lot of other. There's a lot more there. Okay, we have things like you mentioned deal. So how many years ago was this report done in Hobart? 2010. So Copenhagen expert on wise cities as well. So he says change, this is a bit scary, but 50 to 60 years. So it's, you know, and look.
You paid it right. We're 15 years in now. There's young people in this room as well. It's like, in your lifetime, you will see it.
I'm seeing some horrid faces, horrid looks on faces.
I know, but it's a chipping away, attractive places to change. It was interesting to hear Neil talking about how Hobart has changed since 2006 when he moved here. Think of those differences, people who have spent the time, or are new arrivals, and the changes that you're already starting to see.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Rachel.
Yes, Samara.
As a Tasmanian,
Yes.
born in Tasmania, with a bit of blue blood Tasmanian sort of heritage in you.
A bit of convict, thanks.
Yeah, a bit of context, all that stuff. What do you think about living in Hobart right now?
I didn't mean to come back. I came back and I was 30 with a broken heart. I thought I was going to just be here for a tiny moment in time. We were on the cusp of change and we have seen that change and we are living that change. And I am glad to be here, even though next plan has been Bangkok. I'll be in Bangkok in the next decade. However, I love living in Hobart. Bottom line, culture wars culture wars, which we are seeing perpetuated and played out and panned up, and I think this is one of the biggest risks we are facing today in That's what
So, thank you everyone. I think just as a final little reflection in understanding this apparent oxymoron of bureaucracy, there was a lot of deep thinking about, is it the structure of organisations that matters, or is it the culture? The conclusion doesn't matter how you construct an organisation, it can still be beholden to the worst of its values. It is the culture that brings us together, and this can be the beginning of something bigger and something better. So thank you very much for coming tonight and participating.